Hi there, welcome. Today I'm here with the GT-1, the latest multi-effects processor from Boss, and I've owned this unit since it came out, and I've mainly been using it as both an amps processor and also an effects processor. So I've used both the effects in here and also the preamps, and I found that to give me some excellent sounds, some tones, and it's overall basically very easy to create patches and set it all up. But I thought that today I would show you in this video a couple of basic steps that you would have to go through in order to get your GT-1 set up properly. Because often on a lot of forums and Facebook pages and anything like that, I see a lot of people asking a lot of questions about how to do that, how does the GT-1 sound, and basically just everything in between that. And in order to get the most out of any multi-effects unit, you basically have to read the manual. You can, of course, you can just jump in and play, but you would be skipping a lot of the important steps from the manual. So I highly recommend that every time you get a new effects, multi-effects, that you take your time and basically jump into the manual and read it, because a lot of the questions that you might have while you just jumped right ahead and just tried to operate this effects unit, a lot of those questions could have been answered if you've just taken a look at the manual. So basically just stating that very first step would be to take out the manual, read it. If you're not interested in reading the whole manual, then just look at the table of content and basically just scroll through and see what you need. But very first thing to decide here when you get your GT-1 set up is that you need to go press the menu button here. That will take you into the menu screen. And let me just see if I can take you guys a little closer here so you can see what I'm talking about. I press the menu button and you get into the menu here. You have a couple of different options or new menus here that you can choose from. And the very first step that we're going to take here is that we're going to put our cursor on the output and we're going to press enter. And this is just going to take us into the output select. And this right here is a very, very, very key step to letting the GT know what equipment it's hooked up to. So from here you have to decide how you're basically going to use the GT-1. And let's say right now on mine here I've set it to line phones, and that's because, as I said, I use both the effects but also use the preamps in here. So I don't use an external amplifier. I use only the GT-1 here as my full sound. And therefore I've set my output select to line phones, because when I'm not at rehearsals or playing live, then I have a set of decent studio monitors here in my apartment, and I hook the GT-1 up to that. So by selecting line phones, I'm also enabling the preamp settings here, so I can choose whatever preamp I like. And when I go to create patches, I have a couple of different preamps that I use, but we'll talk a little bit about that later. So whenever you're connecting to headphones or a line level, which could be studio monitors directly to the PA if you're playing live, for example, then I would shoot for this, because when you're plugged into your headphones or to the PA studio monitors, then you will need a source for a preamp, and the GT-1 just enables that when this setting is chosen. So that's the reason I use that. The other points that you can use in here, for example, if you have a Roland JC-120 amplifier, then you can choose that setting by just using the knob number 1 here, scrolling through it. If you have a very small amp, could be something like the Roland Cube or anything that comes in small sizes, then you would probably get best sound results by choosing small amp. You also have the combo amp setting, which is more like if you have a Fender type amplifier with 1 times 12 speakers or 2 times 12 speakers, anything like that. So a combo with dedicated speaker outputs. You also have the option of something called stack amp. If you have a Marshall stack or Hiwatt stack, anything like that, then you would get the most out of the sound by choosing that particular setting. But in addition to running this line phones here as the output select, you also have the models that I just talked about, just added the return to it. So you have JC-120 return, combo return, stack return. And what those settings mean is basically if your amplifier has an effects loop, then you will have both a send and return. And basically your effects loop is where you put your time-based effects, because in a, let's say in an ideal signal chain or effects pedal board, you would have your compressors, overdrive, distortions, anything like that before the preamp. So you would plug your guitar into your compressor, then into the overdrives and distortions, then from the distortions right into the amp, and then you would connect your time-based effects, chorus, delay, reverb in the effects loop, because then those would be set after the preamp, and that's just basically where time-based effects are to some sounding better, but it's all optional. So that's what the return settings mean. So you would generally just take your guitar, plug it into the input of the GT-1 here, and you would take the left output and plug that into the return. And when you do that, your amplifier's EQ section will be bypassed. So depending on what amplifier you have, on some amplifiers the only knob working on your amplifier when connecting to the return is the volume, because that is what sets the master volume of the amp. Basically just like you have a fader on the PA or on your FR speakers, anything like that. So by choosing the return, you can actually run the unit using the preamps also, without having to run the line phones, if you just want to use your basically your amplifier as your monitor at home. I used that for a couple of years, and I would say it got my sound close enough to where I needed them to be. But the best solution for me was when I bought the studio monitors, because they are FR, you know, full range flat response, meaning that they won't color the sound. So also this is stated in the manual as one of the very first steps. So the output select is basically your very first thing to set up, and this setting here is a setting that, you know, set it and forget it, because you only have to set it one time. Of course, if you one day are playing through PA and you set it to line phones, just set it there, go ahead and play. If you're the next day connected in the front end of an amplifier, then of course you will have to go and select what type of amplifier you're using. So if it's a J120, then just select that setting, or if it's a combo amp. But if you're just going to use one output select for the whole thing, then just you set it once and then you forget it. Then just adjust it depending on if you're switching equipment and anything like that. So that's basically a key point here. And let's say that you haven't paid attention to this yet. You just jumped right in and played it, and you plugged your GT-1 into your studio monitors, and you haven't set the output select to line phones. You have, let's say you've left it at the JC120 setting, and you basically think everything sounds fine there. Then try and change it. And of course the patches that you have created with the JC120 setting into your studio monitors are not going to sound the same when you change the output select, because that's why this setting here is so important, because letting the GT-1 know exactly what equipment it's hooked up to is just going to take all those sound consistencies into perspective. And since you have these opportunities here, just go ahead and select one of them, because it's just going to help you out in the long haul. Because as I said, if you created a bunch of patches using the JC120 patch, and you just found, oh, I have to change my output select to line phones, of course those patches will probably not sound the same because you have altered the output select. So it's just important, and just to save you a bunch of headaches basically, to get around this sort of thing. And oftentimes you will experience that, at least I've heard a lot of people say, I believe I've set up my output select wrong because all my patches sound thin and it doesn't sound that good. And how do you people get a good consistent sound out of the GT-1? And this has all, in most cases, to do with the output select being set up wrong. So basically, worst case scenario is that if this is set up wrong, the output select, then you're going to have a non-consistent sound throughout your patches. So that's why it's so important to set out the output select correctly, and just leave it there, set it and forget it, as we talked about. And it's just going to save you a lot of headaches down the road. Yeah, and as I said, the line phones, when you select that, the preamps are by default enabled, because you need an amplifier and a cabinet, otherwise you're getting a very unpleasant sound. So that's one very, very important step to follow. Another thing that I like to think about when I either get a new effects pedal or multi-effects, especially with multi-effects, I like to think about the general usage of this particular, and I did the same with the GT-1 here. I was kind of thinking to myself, okay, when I get this unit, what am I basically going to use it for? Am I only going to use it for the effects in the GT-1, meaning that I won't use the preamps in here, meaning that I would probably just hook the GT-1 up straight into my amplifier without running to headphones or PAs or anything like that, and basically just using the reverbs, delays, choruses, overdrives, compression, anything like that, but not using the preamps. Or am I going to take full advantage of this multi-effects by using both the effects and the preamps too? And it was pretty clear to me, because I've owned a lot of the Boss GT series, and I switched from the GT10 to this GT1, and I knew straight away that I was going to use this for both the effects and also the preamps, because when I play or rehearse, we don't often have a lot of space to roam around. And the size here of the GT-1 just fit the bill for me. And from there, it was basically just a matter of me getting to know the unit, sitting down, using a couple of hours to figure out, okay, what type of sounds can I get out of this unit? And I quickly discovered that this unit could basically do everything that I needed. And it was also going to save me some space on my pedal board. So I was quite happy with what I did there, and I just decided that I'm going to use this for both the effects and the preamps. But of course, if you're only going to use the GT-1 as an effects unit, meaning that you're running the, if you're running in mono, you're running the left out to the input of your amp. If you're running stereo, you're running the left out to your left amp and the right to your input on the right amp, of course. But if you're just going to use it as the unit for effects, then I highly recommend that you turn off the preamp, because you basically don't want to have the preamps running while you're running into one or two amplifiers, because basically what will happen if the preamp button is activated, if you have one or two preamps running either mono or stereo and this light is coming on, then you basically have 3 amps running at the same time, and depending on how your preamp or preamps are responding to this preamp in the GT-1, you can get some really unpleasant and uncontrolled sounds. So I highly recommend that you turn the preamp button off, because it has nothing to do in the state that you're using the GT-1 as an effects unit only. But if you're using it as I do here, straight into a PA or a set of studio monitors or headphones, you should basically have this preamp on at all times. And basically just, let me just show you here. If I just click the setting here, you can see that on the first page you have a lot of parameters to choose from. You have first here the type of amplifier that you want to use. I'm very fond of the clean twin. It sounds really good to me. It can be very clean when you need it to, and you can also set it to, you know, that kind of right on breakup with a tube amplifier, for example. And then you have your bass, middle, treble here to control the EQs, and lastly you have also an EQ for presence, but you have a bright switch and the speaker type also. And to match the clean twin with the 2x 12-inch speakers, that is just, to me it's a match made in heaven, because I found that if you're just using the original setting that the speaker type is set to by default, to my ears it kind of sounds like the everything is just sounding too digital. There's nothing natural about the sound. So I spent a little time trying to fiddle around with the speaker types just to see if there were anything better in there to accommodate for that. And I found that basically, if you think about it, it's common sense, because most amplifiers nowadays come with either a 1x 12-inch speakers or 1x 12, some comes with 2x 12 speakers or 2x 10, anything in between. So I just thought, okay, let's just try and set it to 2x 12 speakers and see what that sounds like. And when I did that, and I just plugged a couple of chords with the clean twin amplifier here, I was stunned, because it sounded much more alive and much more like, you know, closer to that tube amp setting that most guys are searching for within a multi-effects processor. So I basically just decided to stick with the clean twin with the matched cabinet there, because a couple of years ago, when I was using the GT-10, I was using a lot of different amps from that particular unit, and I just found that all my patches were generally, all the gain stages were out of control. So if I were on one patch and the volumes were right, sounded good, when I just changed to the next patch, all of a sudden my volumes were dropping and the sound was very weak and not like the previous. So I did a little search and tried to figure out what I could basically do to get around this. And one of the things that made this a lot easier for me was, especially with the GT-1 here, I decided that when I got the unit, I was going to spend a lot of time plugging it into my studio monitors and just scrolling through the different types of preamps here, and basically just be a little critical to the amps and just see, okay, what kind or what types of these amplifiers will I actually end up using in my patches. And do I really need to have, 7 different amplifiers that I use across different patches? And I basically just came down to using 2 amplifiers, believe it or not. And one being the Clean Twin here, and the other being Deluxe Crunch amplifier. And I just found that the Clean Twin is a very natural sounding, clean, slightly on the breakup side, where the Deluxe Crunch is kind of a bit more on the brittle side of things, and maybe has a little bit more punch to it. So basically using the Clean Twin on most of my patches and using the Deluxe Crunch on a couple of my other patches. So I just basically narrowed things down just to make it a lot easier for me that way. And the reason I did that was because I found that on units like the GT-10 and the GT-100, there were a couple of videos on YouTube about doing a step called input calibration, which means that you make sure that the guitar that you have connected to the input of the GT-1, the GT-100 or the GT-10 basically isn't sending too hot of a signal into the unit, causing basically your input of the unit to clip or distort, digital distortion. And for the GT-10 and the GT-100, you could perform that step if you just search GT-100, GT-10 input calibration. But this is actually not a step that is possible on the GT1 here, because basically if you press the menu button here again on the GT10 and GT100, you would have right beside the output here, you would have a menu called input, and you do not have that here on the GT1. If you go to the preferences, you can see it's just all about the patches. So on the GT1 you have no possibility of actually input calibrating the unit. So this is kind of leading to the next step here, and at first I really thought it was kind of a bummer that the folks at Boss and Roland didn't really put an input menu into here so that you could actually adjust the input and do the same thing as you would on the GT10 and the GT100. Because if you're using the GT1 here with 2 different guitars, then you would have to create separate patches for those 2 guitars. And many people are not aware of this. So they use a Strat on 5 patches and everything sounds peachy. And then they use a Les Paul on the same 5 patches and everything sounds completely different. And people basically don't get that. But it's common sense, because those 2 guitars are really not the same. Most often Strat type guitars has single coil pickups. Some has a humbucker in the bridge, but mostly single coils, and the Les Paul has humbuckers. And you don't have humbuckers which are exactly the same, so you can basically match things like that. So when I discovered that I couldn't input calibrate this unit, I was kind of thinking, okay, what can I do then to go about this? And I talked to a friend of mine, which actually said, well, if you really want to get down and take a close look at the perspective of things here, then you can borrow my dB meter or volume meter, and basically just hook it up to the GT1, and then using the volume or dB meter to monitoring each effect, each preamp, to see how they actually respond to the guitar that I'm using. So I said, okay, I'll do that. I give it a try, and I used a couple of hours to kind of get into things and see how that worked. And for the time being right now, I'm playing a Telecaster with only 1 humbucker in the bridge position. And I'm just playing that humbucker in full humbucker mode, so I'm not using the split on the guitar. it basically just sounds a little too thin for me. So I used the full humbucker. So I plugged that guitar in, connected the GT-1 to the volume meter, and I basically just dived right in to see, okay, I know I have my amps of preference, so I knew I had to check out the Clean Twin and the Deluxe Crunch. So from there I would just have to decide, okay, how am I actually going to check the levels to match them all here? I just decided that I would turn on the preamp, select the preamp, set the settings, and select the type of speaker that I was going to use. And then I would strum a couple of chords and see where the meter, see how high the meter would go. And of course I had connected my studio monitors too, so I couldn't play it up as loud as I would at rehearsals, but that's basically it's not doing a difference when you're using a dB meter, because you can monitor every effect. And I created a couple of patches where I've matched or leveled out all the effects at, I believe right now it's the output level set as 40. Yeah, and I did that at the output level with 40, and everything was nice and even, no volume drops or raise in volume. And I just turned the output level up to about 80 to see if everything was still matched. And it basically was, because the only thing that the output level here is really doing is just raising the output. It's not altering any of the effects. So this was kind of a nice discovery for me, because that meant if I just use a dB meter from now on to check my volumes, then I can create separate patches for separate guitars, or basically just store patches for occasions like that. And this is basically just leading me to the next step here. So if you remember, we just set the output select, which is important. And from there we talked about the usage of a multi-effects processor. If you're using it in front of an amp, using this only as effects unit, or if you're using it for use with your studio monitors, or to PA where you're using the preamps and the effects. And this here is leading up to the very last step that I think is key to basically getting this to work and be consistent. And it's basically called level matching. And it's a topic that most forums are flooded with, basically, because a lot of people are asking questions or sharing experience on how you level match things in your multi-effects processor. And level matching basically means that, as I said, when I turned on the preamp here, choosing the Clean Twin and the cabinet, I strummed a couple of chords and I looked at the dB volume meter to see where it peaked out. And then I thought, okay, where I get the peak, or where the sound was at its maximum, or the highest I should say, I decided that should be the point I should match the rest of my effects to. So I said, okay, strum a couple of chords, and the preamp is set, let's just say that it was set to minus 18, given that the volume output level is set to 40. So my highest sound would be at minus 18 on the dB meter. So I would basically have to go through the compressor, OD, the chorus, delay and reverb, and check that none of those effects were either below or over minus 18. So I now knew that the preamp was set up as it should be, peaking at minus 18. I then went to my OD distortion boxes here, and I basically use, I think, 2 or 3 types from here, which is the Clean Twin, which is the Clean Boost, of course, the Clean Boost, and the T-Scream, and sometimes the Blues Overdrive. So I left the preamp on, and I turned the OD section on here, and I started out choosing the Clean Boost to see how that would react in volume compared to the preamp. So I strummed a couple of chords again, and I saw that the Clean Boost was actually matching that. So I had no raise or no drop in volume here. So that particular distortion box or overdrive boost was where it should be. Then I scrolled to the blues overdrive, and at that point I discovered that that particular model was actually way below the -18 that I shoot for. I believe it was down at -24 or anything like that, so a good amount under that. So I had to go in and adjust the level of that effect, and I found out that it should be around 65 or 70 on the effects level, just to basically match the -18 that I got with the preamp, because I'm basically matching the preamp's level to all the other effects to get an even consistent sound here. And then I went to the Tube Scream or T-Scream type there to see where it was at, and it was also at 50. So the clean boost, the T-Scream was both at 50, but the blues overdrive needed to come up to 65 or 70 in effects level to match that -18. And I basically went through the compressors using or at least monitoring the types of compressor that I was using, and I found that most of those compressors were actually way below, even though it sounds like they're boosting the sound. But I found that most of the compressors, you can see here, you have high band, you have the Boss, you have high band, light, decomp, which is a clone of the Dynacomp, the orange, fat comp, mild, and a stereo comp. And basically for all of those types of compressors here, I had to raise some of the levels, and mostly I had to raise them to about 65 and 70 again to match the -18 that I got the first time around with the preamp. And I then went to the chorus, and given that the chorus is in stereo, the output is greater. So I found that if the chorus effects level was all the way up at 100, it would actually create a volume boost. So I had to actually bring it down halfway or a little below that. So somewhere between 40 to 50 in effects level would actually be where it matches the desired -18 of the preamp here. So I did that, and I went through all the effects that I knew that I was going to use, and all the preamps also, because when I switched from the clean twin, which I knew had the highest measuring or monitoring at -18 dB, when I switched from the clean twin to the Deluxe Crunch, I actually found out that the Deluxe Crunch was below the 18 that I had on the clean twin before, so I actually had to raise the level. I basically I selected the Deluxe Crunch here, and I had to alter the level here up, and basically just change it from 50 all the way up to 65 to make it match. And I went through all the effects that I knew that I was going to use, and since I had borrowed that dB meter, I wrote every parameter down that I knew I had to change or adjust to make it match, so that I could use that in the future. And in a couple of weeks we have a gig coming up, and we have to play about 40 songs for that gig. And I went in and I created patches for every song. I've always done that, but on the GT-10 I had problems with the volume, as you all know, because I didn't use a dB meter. I wasn't monitoring or measuring my input levels or effects levels, anything like that. I was basically just turning on and adjusting till I found a sound that I basically liked. And you can do that too, but you would just have to take into consideration that by level matching your effects is just going to give you a smoother and better sound in the quality of your sound and patches. So I went in and created 40 different patches, ranging from straight up clean patches with chorus and compressors to overdrive sounds and ringing lead sounds. And as you can imagine, there were quite a bit of difference in volume. also when you go from clean to overdrive, you have to make those two match each other, because if you start out playing clean and everything sounds as it should, when you switch to the overdrive, that might boost things a little bit. So when you go from the overdrive back to the clean, you might actually disappear because the volume has been altered there. So I went over everything, created the patches, made sure that all my patches were consistent at the same level on the dB meter. And everything sounded very good to me, even here at home at low volumes through my studio monitors. When I got to rehearsals, I just knew that I had to crank up my output level, and I knew that I set it roughly around 80 or 90% on the output. And we played through, I believe, 25 songs, anything like that. And I didn't bend down to change the volume or do anything. And all of the sounds were basically right where they needed to be. Everything sounded so much better, bigger and brighter, smoother than it ever did before. And that was kind of a real eye-opener for me, because being able to monitoring your effects and the sound you're creating and making a match is just going to make your patches much more consistent. And it is something that I highly recommend. Either that you, for example, go out and buy a decent decibel meter or volume meter, or buy some sort of plugin to your whatever recording software you're using, and basically just hooking the GT-1 up via USB to monitor that. Sorry. And by level matching all my patches, it made a world of difference to me. I believe that I've never had patches to sound anything like this. Even when I switched from clean to overdrive and back again, I was able to hear myself through both scenarios. My clean sound wasn't really disappearing when I switched back from the overdrive, so I was able to cut right through. And I also like to use the CTL1 foot switch on the GT1 here to assign a solo boost for when I have to solo. And I always have an overdrive stomp on when or before I go into playing solo. If not, I like to add in an overdrive. And then I like to set the control foot switch 1 to OD solo, if you know that. If you press the memory edit button here, and you get into the signal chain. If you scroll, you see that you have your control here, the CTL1. Press enter and get in here. I like to set it OD solo. You can also set it to preamp solo, but depending, if you're having a clean amp chosen, then you won't get that much of cut through, because there's not added any gain to that preamp. So if I have an overdrive stomp on, I basically like to set the CTL1 to OD solo, because that is going to boost the sound a little bit, to cut through better, and also going to add a little bit of extra EQ, basically just by pressing that one knob here. And I use that for all of my solo sounds. Of course, adding some delay and compressors, just to make everything a little bigger and fatter. But using that OD solo is going to give you that little extra to just push through and really stand out if you have a solo part coming up. And that's why I like these boss units so much, because you can, with the tap of one foot switch, you can basically control, let's say, 4 different parameters by just clicking that one foot switch. And that's what I like about this. So that is basically my approach here on how to set up your GT-1. I hope that this has made sense to a lot of you, and that I made myself clear. If not, you're always very welcome to post some comments, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have or confusions. You're also very welcome to write me an email or anything like that. Requests are welcome too. I plan on doing a couple of other videos regarding the GT-1 here. The next video I might do could possibly be about how I hook up my GT-1 when I go to play live, and also how I hook it up when I play at rehearsals, and how I hook it up at home, and also taking a look at how some of you guys could hook it up, depending on that different type of equipment that you guys have. Because I see a lot of people struggling with that too, and I basically think it could be nice for someone out there to basically just get a little clearer look of things there. So I'll let this be it for now, guys, and feel free to share, subscribe, like this video, and please do comment if you have questions or if I made anything unclear here. It can be hard to, remember everything, so if I might have skipped something, I'll try to include it, or you can ask about it in the comment section. And requests are very welcome. If you have requests on patches that you like me to do or anything like that, then just let me know. I'm kind of thinking about doing a small pack of patches with different patches from different artists. Could be artists like David Gilmour / Brian May of Queen, anything like that. If this is something you would be interested in, then just let me know, and I'll get that underway. But guys, thanks for watching. I'll be back very soon, and thanks for all the support. It's really nice to see that people are watching my videos and making use of those. So you all have a nice day, guys, and I will probably talk to you soon.